Assalamu alaikum. Assalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. In the last session, we talked about hereafter, the Judgment Day or Qiyamah, and what happens after. Today, we want to discuss what happens in this world and before the Day of Judgment in this life on earth. There may be some few things that overlap with last session that we briefly mentioned. The content, however, will be different but related, inshallah. God created mankind and made us responsible for our actions by granting us freedom of choice or free will and the intelligence to discern right and wrong. Hence, any point or privilege or reward the man gains comes as a result of his freedom of choice. Let's step back a bit and review the process or flowchart first. Since I don't have a way of showing you the chart, imagine or draw 4 boxes and call them box 1 through 4, with each box connected to the next with a one-way arrow connection from box 1 to box 2, box 2 to box 3, and so on. Box 1 is titled Allah and His Universal Laws that include system of cause and effects. Box number 2 is titled Human Consciousness, which includes our nafs, and Quran calls nafsul ammara, lawwama, mutma'inna, or the soul that incites to evil or prone to evil, including Shaitan's whisper, the soul that is reproachful or blameful, and the soul that is in complete rest, calm, and satisfaction. All 3 are inherent in our soul. Box number 3 is titled Human Choice or Selection, meaning human, due to his freedom of choice, selects or decides given the content of boxes 1 and 2, or simply put, his reaction. Box number 4 is titled The Consequence of Man's Deed. So when you draw and fill in and connect these boxes, the simple diagram shows the relationship between things that affect man's life, a process by which mankind makes a decision and sees the result. In other words, we all come to many forks on the road of life where we must choose which way to go, pretty much in everything. 2 people may lose something important like their loved one or job or property. However, their reaction in box 3 may be different. Hence, the consequence of their action in box 4 will be different. 2 people may suddenly become poor or rich. What they do next as a result of their freedom of choice may be completely different. Same goes with our feelings. For example, both hope and disappointment are inside of us. Our soul experiences both. However, how we choose to deal with it is our reaction, is our choice. Hence the consequence of how we deal with it. Now, with that, let's talk about freedom of choice, or box 3, which is really the topic of this session. Any privilege, any accolade, any recognition human earns, it is due to his freedom of choice. If it was due to determinism, predestination, or jabr, then it would not be considered as an accomplishment or not worthy of praise or merit. In other words, if I did a good deed because I had to by force, then it would not be praiseworthy. We must really appreciate this grace, the freedom of choice given to us by Allah Azza wa Jal. That brings us to our verse of the day, or verses of the day. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا هديناه السبيل إما شاكرا وإما كفورا. Chapter 76, verse 3. Indeed, we showed him the way, whether he be grateful or ungrateful. And in verse 29, same chapter, إن هذه تذكرة فمن شاء اتخذ إلى ربه سبيلا. This is an admonition or reminder. Whoever will, let him take a path to his Lord. Please note, this freedom of choice was given to us as a standard feature God created us with. As a standard feature God created us with. Hence, all humans have it. In other words, the freedom of choice itself was given to us by determinism, as Allah willed for us to have it, without asking us whether we want it or not. And He says, I gave it to you, and gave you the guidance or operation manual for this life on how to use it. Now that you have it, what are you going to do with it? What do you choose to do with this free will? Now, we have freedom of choice for multiple reasons. Or shall we say, the proof is that, number one, if we do something bad, we feel sorry. We feel remorseful. If we were forced to do it, if it was determinism or jabr, why should we be sorry or remorseful? It's not my fault. I was forced. Number two, we feel ashamed when we do something bad. This is different than being sorry, of course. I did something indecent. I'm shameful. I blame myself. Nevertheless, if I was forced by jabr or determinism, what is there to be shameful about? Number three, if there was jabr or determinism, education or training, which is common everywhere, would be meaningless. You educate someone to do certain thing or go certain way to accomplish something. And you give it to the one who has a freedom of choice, right? Otherwise, if he's forced to do or go in a certain way, what good is the training, guidance, education to go another way, to do something else? Number three, if determinism or jabr was governing the affairs and actions, then rewards or punishment or recognition, admonition would be meaningless. If someone does something bad, we try to advise him or reproach him, warn him, because we know he could have refused to do it. Or someone does something good, we encourage him, recognize him, reward him, because we know he had a choice to do something else, something opposite, something bad instead. Number five, if determinism or jabr was governing human life, then what would be the meaning of Qiyamah, Resurrection Day, or even heaven and hell? Whoever does good, God wanted him to do it, and he had no role or choice in the matter. And the same for someone who does a bad thing. God wanted both to be done. So these are some of the rationale demonstrating free will. Of course, there are things in the universe that operate based on determinism, or jabr, like the creation, like the things in nature, animals' instinct, the sun, the sunshine, rain, clouds, all of these. Even this free will is given by determinism. It's given to us by determinism, but once given to us, we take it from there and with it make choices in this life and either enjoy or suffer the consequence. In this life first, by universal laws, as we talked about earlier, and ultimately hereafter. Allah highlights this in this verse in chapter 41. من عمل صالحا فلنفسه ومن أساء فعليها وما ربك بظلام للعبيد. Whoever does good or works righteousness does it for himself, and whoever does evil does so against himself. Your Lord is never unjust to his servant. So this verse actually summarizes it all. So with free will comes the responsibility and consequences, or the thing that distinguishes us from other creatures. Hence this world, this life becomes a testing ground for the mankind. Without test, without action, one cannot claim anything. Anyone can claim to be righteous, to be good person, but unless he is put into the actual situation, unless he is put into test so he can act and demonstrate, how would we know? How could he claim anything on the day of judgment even? It's as if I claim to be the best swimmer, but if I'm never put in the water, how could I be credited for such a title? Allah says, إِنَّا جَعَلْنَا مَا عَلَى الْأَرْضِ زِينَةً لَهَا لِنَبْلُوَهُمْ أَيُّهُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. We have made all that is on earth as an ornament or glittering show in order that we may test them as to which of them are best in conduct. Chapter 18, verse 7. And then it continues in verse 29, same chapter. وَقُلِ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. Say the truth is from your Lord. Then whosoever wills, let him believe. And whosoever wills, let him reject. Verse 29. Whoever wants to believe, that's his choice. Let him believe. And whoever wants to reject, that's his choice as well. And then in verse 30, it says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ أَنَّا لَا نُضِيعُ أَجْرَ مَنْ أَحْسَنَ عَمَلًا. As to those who believe and do good works, we will not neglect the rewards of those who do good deeds. So it talks about the result. لا نضيع إنا لا نضيع أجر من أحسن عملا. Now, what about Allah's will or irada? Let's briefly clarify that when we talk about Allah's will, there is His formative or determinative or takwini will, which says إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون. Indeed, when He intends, He wills a thing, His command is be, and it is. So this is called formative or takwini will, like the creation, for example. And then there is His tashri'i will or qadha, by decree or command, which refers to Allah's command to us, or you might say something in our nature, inherent in our nature, and it is up to us to obey or disobey. As an example, the word qadha, decree or command, is used in وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. Chapter 17, verse 23. Your Lord has decreed or ordered you to worship none but Him and be kind to your parents. So this qadha is not a takwini or determinative qadha, because we know many people who do not worship God or they worship other deities. We also know many who are not kind to their parents. Both of these are in box 1 and refer to God's will, but there's a big difference between them. One is takwini or formative, and the other one is tashri or decreed, where our choice is to obey or disobey. Now, in parentheses, Ibn Arabi, who was the founder of Sufism, which subscribes to Jabr or determinism, in his book Khusus al-Hikam cites this verse that we just recited and says, Qada Rabbuka, or your Lord decreed in this verse, is a takwini or determinative will to further confirm his doctrine, to substantiate his doctrine of wahdatul wujud, translated as unity of being, which postulates that God and his creation are all one, since all that is created pre-existed in God's knowledge and will return to it, somehow making mystical union with God. Hence, even idolatry is worship of God. Well, this completely opposes the concept of Tawheed, or oneness of God, and is a problematic and irrational doctrine at minimum, because Quran says, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ, there's nothing like him. Citing the verse 1723 for this claim is false. Because, as we said, قَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ, the word qada or hukm or judgment or will of God is not takwini or determinative, but rather decree or command. If it was takwini or determinative, then all humankind would be worshipping God alone. No need for prophets. And then, of course, after that even says, وَبَالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا, be kind to your parents. And we know not everyone on earth is kind to their parents. So it is clear this is a command. This is a commandment, not a takwini ghada or determinative will. Unfortunately, this doctrine of Wahdatul Wujud in Sufism spread among some Muslims, which is of course a deviation that influenced some writers and mystic poets, especially those with tendencies toward Jabr or determinism. As a result, we see poems that contain shirk or polytheism. And I mean explicit poems like مسلمان گر بدانستی که دین چیست بدانستی که دین در بت پرستی است. This is from Gulshan Raz or Secret Rose Garden by Mahmud Shabastari, known as Sheikh Shabastari, who was one of Ibn Arabi's followers and a Sufi poet. As the poem says, addressing the Muslims, if you know what faith is, it is that of worshipping idols or idolatry, which clearly shows the poem is referring to Wahdatul Wujud, or unity of one. God and creation are all the same, and worshipping idols is like worshipping God himself. How absurd and idolatrous. We say, if that was the case, Mr. Ibn Arabi or Sheikh Shabastari, then why did Ibrahim alayhi salam destroy the idols? Why did Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, destroy the idols in Kaaba? Why did all prophets categorically oppose worshipping idols? Why were they even sent anyway? To summarize, Allah has two kinds of will, one being takwini or formative, also called determinative, which is when we say kun fayakun, when he says kun fayakun, or be it, it becomes. It does not involve our freedom of choice And then the second type is a decree in a form of commandment, in which we human have been given the choice to obey or disobey. It is this free will that determines how a person conducts himself in this life, good or bad. While this life is a testing ground for man, it also contains God's universal laws in operation. Hence, the outcome or consequence of our action is often due to these universal laws. If I decide to jump off the roof and kill myself, up to the moment I step off, I am in full control. I still have a choice to jump or not, kill myself or not. But the moment I step off, the universal law, which in this case happened to be gravity, takes over, and I can no longer control it. In other words, I no longer have the choice in the matter. I will crash and die, which is the consequence of my own action. Many of the good things and the bad things we do have consequences in this life. And then, of course, hereafter as well. But we talked about that last time. Let's give an example of all this. Recently, a couple of Jewish philosophers or speakers said that God has used up his energy in creation or creating the universe. Therefore, he's tired and no longer can do anything. This is why he let Holocaust to happen. Otherwise, he would have prevented it. Of course, this is a paraphrase or an understanding from Torah, which says God created the universe in 6 days. Then he rested. In other words, God uses energy, and his energy can be exhausted. Whereas Quran says, لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم. He neither dozes off nor falls asleep. ولا يؤوده حفظهما. Preserving heavens and earth does not tire him. Another Jewish speaker said, well, God was tired. He just detached himself from this world, and that's why Holocaust happened. So this was their response or explanation to Holocaust. From our Islamic perspective, Allah Azza wa Jal does not get tired or sleepy or let loose of this world. He's rather watching, recording, and supervising. Plus, his universal laws are in full operation. And unlike us, nothing escapes from him. The answer is very simple, as we spoke in the last session. By our death, our life or our existence does not end, does not stop. Death takes us from one stage to another. We still exist. God has not lost the sight of us. And before the next life, he will render his judgment. So Hitler and all of his heads of army did not really cease to exist. They are just transferred to another room, another stage, if you will. Now, even in this life, as a consequence of their own action and the universal laws in place, they did suffer some level of punishment. They were defeated. He committed suicide himself. His lieutenants were either killed or executed by trials. Those who supported him and Germany itself suffered as a result. So all of those happened. Not to compare, but on the other hand, throughout the history, Jews themselves have not been angelically innocent either. And from time to time, they have suffered the consequence of their actions. In this world, historically, even now, they influence foreign policies related to Israel in many Western countries, including and especially in US. So much so when there is a resolution voted in UN against Israeli occupation or aggression, it gets vetoed by US. They have their finger on every neighboring country's pulse, conspiring their next schemes. So Hitler and Germany did suffer. However, the ultimate justice will be served in the next stage. Nothing has been taken away from Allah's wisdom and justice. I'm often asked, how could God watch and let such and such happen and not do anything? Where is His justice? Well, above seen with Hitler and Jews is an example. Both sides have done bad deeds and suffered some level of punishment as a result, as a consequence. However, if we were to say this world is based on Jabr or determinism, we could then expect God's interference on everything. But when we have a world where God has given free will to mankind, then I can decide to do good or bad. So does Hitler. Now, suppose any time I'm about to do something bad, I'm stopped by God. An axe comes down on my hand, or God freezes my hand. Then this is no longer called free will. I would no longer have freedom of choice. That was number one. Number two, if God interfered with Holocaust only, it would be unjust not to interfere in Syria today, for example. This means He would have to interfere in each and everything, in everywhere. Number three, if that was the case, this life, this earth, being a testing ground would be meaningless. Absolutely meaningless. Hence, mankind's potential to do bad or good and concept of reward and punishment would be undermined. It is through these trials that we are distinguished, good and bad. Who is a true and sincere believer and who is not? Who is our friend, who is not? When we see a building destroyed as a result of bombing and a child being pulled out of the rubble, how do you and I feel about it? Do we, as a Muslim, a believer, or even a human being, get sad? Or are we indifferent? Do we do something about it? Or at the least pray for them? Or do we just get frustrated, lose faith, and say, where is God? How do people who are suffering, the parents of that child, deal with it? Are they patient, or do they lose faith and hope? How does the Muslim Ummah as a whole and humanity at large deal with it? Especially now that, news travels everywhere. Who is the friend, the helper, and who is the enemy in this scene? These are all tests for all parties involved. وَلِنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. Surely we will test you with something of fear and hunger and loss of wealth and lives and fruit of your toil, and give good news to those who are patient, those who persevere. We don't want to claim we know all of Allah's intentions, but this world is a world of free will. God has given us more in freedom of choice than His interference. But He is present and supervising all affairs. It is in hereafter where He will interfere, or in other words, our free will to do good or bad is taken away, because it's time for accountability, as His judgment will take place. وَنَضَعُ الْمَوَازِينَ الْقِسْطَ لِيَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ وَلَا تُظْلِمُ نَفْسٌ شَيْئًا وَإِنْ كَانَ مِثْقَالَ حَبَّةٍ مِنْ خَرْدَلٍ آتَيْنَا بِهَا. Chapter 21, verse 47. On the day of judgment, we shall set up just scales of justice, so that not a soul will be dealt with unjustly, in the least, even though it be the weight of a mustard seed. Bottom line, this is indeed world of choices. One becomes good, one becomes bad. One is oppressed, one is oppressor. Quran has been very vocal on this topic, which can be expanded in many directions. If God decides to stop every unjust act around the world, so in effect, no one can do injustice, or dhulm, then freedom of choice becomes meaningless. The concept of punishment and rewards becomes meaningless. It is like, imagine as if God has given us perfect eyes, but did not give us the light. What would our eyes be good for? As they are useless, basically, in the dark. Or as if He gave us ears, but no vibration in the air to carry the sound. What would our ears be good for? When He gave us free will, there has to be freedom of choice. Differences in human decisions and actions. However, we must always keep in mind there is a day of judgment, or Yawmul Hisab, after which life continues, and it is part of our existence, part of this discussion, and cannot be separated. Otherwise, we will be stuck in this debate with no answers, like the Jewish philosophers we mentioned. We ask Allah to give us the best understanding of His deen and help us use our free will to choose the best. We ask Allah to help us choose that which pleases Him and use our time, our life, in a fruitful manner. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر والسلام على من اتبع الهدى.